The hardest slap I've ever received wasn't the one that landed on my face. It was what my son said immediately afterward. There were nearly 300 people watching. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ballroom ceiling. Champagne glasses clinked. A string quartet was playing in the corner. Then, everything stopped. My name is Russell Whitmore. I'm 64 years old. And at my only son's wedding, he looked me straight in the eye, slapped me across the face, and shouted, "You're not my father anymore." Then he smiled. "No, you're just my mum's biggest regret." The room went silent. I tasted blood, not much. Just enough to remind me I was still standing. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Did he really just hit his dad?" My son didn't care. He adjusted the cuff of his tuxedo as though nothing unusual had happened. The photographer slowly lowered his camera. Even the wedding planner looked frozen. No one knew what to do. I did. Nothing. I bent down, picked up my glasses from the marble floor, wiped one cracked lens with my handkerchief, put them back on, looked at my son one last time, and quietly said, "I hope that made you feel taller." Then I walked out. No shouting, no threats, no dramatic speech. Just one sentence. Because I had learned something a long time ago, the angriest man in the room almost always loses. The quiet one usually wins. People assume my wife and I divorced years ago. We didn't. That's what made everything stranger. My wife, Margaret, was sitting only 12 feet away when her son hit me. She never stood up, never screamed, never ran after me. She simply lowered her eyes. Some people later called her heartless. I didn't. I knew exactly why she stayed seated. She was terrified, not of me. Of him. Our son hadn't become cruel overnight. Cruelty had become his personality. His name is Adrian Whitmore, 34, corporate attorney, perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect public image. He believed every room belonged to him the moment he entered it. The problem wasn't confidence, it was entitlement. People often ask when children become strangers. There isn't one moment, it's thousands of tiny moments. The first time they mock you instead of thanking you. The first time they only call when they need money. The first time they introduce you by your first name, because dad sounds too working class. Yes, that actually happened. He was 28. We were attending one of his firm's charity galas. A partner asked who I was. Adrian smiled and said, "This is Russell, not my father. Just Russell." On the drive home, I asked why. He laughed. "It sounds more professional." Professional, that word became his religion. Everything had to look successful, expensive, exclusive, perfect, even family, especially family. I was the only thing he couldn't rebrand. I wasn't rich, at least not in the way Adrian measured wealth. I spent 39 years building custom furniture by hand, dining tables, libraries, grand staircases, church altars. If you've ever walked into the old courthouse downtown, the judge's bench was mine. The mayor's conference table, mine. Half the historic homes in Ashford carried my work. I never signed any of it. Wood doesn't need signatures, it only needs honesty. My hands carried scars older than Adrian himself. Every cut, every splinter, had paid for his private schools, his law degree, his apartment, his first car, his honeymoon. He called them opportunities. I called them overtime. A week before the wedding, Margaret came into my workshop. She looked exhausted. "Russell, I need to ask you something." I kept sanding a walnut tabletop. "What is it?" She hesitated. "Adrian doesn't want you giving a speech." I nodded. I figured. He stopped. I looked up. "What?" "He'd rather you sit near the back." I smiled. "Because of my clothes?" She couldn't answer. That was answer enough. The truth was, Adrian hated that I still dressed like a craftsman, leather boots, flannel shirts, calloused hands. He once told me, "People think you're one of the hired staff." I answered, "I am. I've been hired by life." He didn't appreciate the joke. The morning of the wedding, I finished one last project before getting dressed. Not because I had to, because working with wood always calmed me. As I locked my workshop, I noticed a black luxury SUV parked across the street. It had been there twice already that week, engine running, dark tinted windows. The moment I looked at it, it drove away, slowly, almost deliberately. I assumed it belonged to one of Adrian's wealthy friends. I was wrong, very wrong, and by the time I discovered who had been watching my workshop, my son would wish that slap had never left his hand. People say revenge is born from anger. They're wrong. Anger burns too fast. Real revenge is built with patience. The morning after the wedding, I unlocked my workshop at exactly 7. Same routine, same old radio, same cup of black coffee, same scent of walnut and cedar. The slap was already yesterday. I had no interest in replaying it. I was far more interested in understanding one thing. Who had been sitting in that black SUV? Around 9 o'clock, my landline rang. Hardly anyone called it anymore. Whitmore Custom Furniture. A calm voice answered. Mr. Whitmore. Speaking. My name is Julian Rhodes. I believe someone has been trying to buy your workshop. I frowned. I'm not selling. I know. That's why I'm calling. Silence, he continued. My client asked me to purchase it anonymously. I declined. That caught my attention. Why? Because I don't enjoy dishonest clients. I slowly sat down. What client? I'm afraid I can't disclose that. But he intends to try again. The call ended there. No sales pitch, no explanation. Nothing. That afternoon, I drove past Adrian's new house, not to spy, to return something. During the wedding rehearsal, Margaret had accidentally left one of her photo albums in my truck. I parked across the street. Before I reached the front door, voices drifted through an open window. I recognized Adrian immediately. He'll cave. Another man laughed. You're sure? My father? He always folds. He'll probably sign everything just to keep the peace. Everything? I stopped walking, then Adrian laughed again. The workshop's sitting on prime commercial property. The developers already have buyers lined up. My stomach tightened. Developer? What developers? Another voice spoke. So once he signs, you'll own the land. Adrian answered confidently. No, we'll own it. Then came the sentence that made everything clear. My old man still thinks this is about family. It stopped being about family months ago. I quietly backed away from the house. The photo album still sat on the passenger seat. I drove home without delivering it. For the first time, I wasn't thinking like a father. I was thinking like a man someone had declared war on. That evening, I unlocked an old filing cabinet in the corner of my office. 39 years of paperwork. Receipts, blueprints, contracts, tax records. Near the bottom, I found exactly what I was looking for. A thick folder labeled Whitmore Workshop, Original Purchase. I smiled. Adrian had made one enormous mistake. He assumed he knew everything I owned. He didn't, because he'd never cared enough to ask. 2 days later, Margaret appeared at my workshop. She looked like she hadn't slept. I knew you'd still be here. I usually am. She stood silently for a while, then whispered, I'm sorry. For what? For raising him to think appearances matter more than people. I carefully put down my measuring tape. No, you didn't raise him alone. Tears filled her eyes. You hate me. I shook my head. I hate what we've allowed him to become. She looked around the workshop. I came because she hesitated. Adrian asked me to. I wasn't surprised. What does he want? He wants you to come over Sunday. I smiled faintly. To apologize? She looked away. No, to sign papers. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no disappointment. Only confirmation. What papers? He says they're routine. Just estate planning. I almost laughed. Estate planning? I was still alive. Margaret finally looked at me. Russell, please don't sign anything. That sentence told me everything. You've seen them. She nodded slowly. And? They're not estate papers. What are they? She whispered so quietly I almost missed it. They transfer control of your workshop if you're ever declared medically incapable of running it. I stared at her. I've never been declared incapable. I know. But he says after the incident at the wedding, people already think you're unstable. The room became perfectly silent. Now I understood the slap, the public humiliation, the lies. None of it had been impulsive. It had been preparation. If enough people believed I was an angry old man losing control, then challenging my decisions later would become much easier. Adrian hadn't humiliated me because he hated me. He humiliated me because he needed witnesses. Witnesses who would someday say, yes. Mr. Whitmore seemed confused. He seemed emotional. He caused a scene. Except I hadn't. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't threatened anyone. I had simply walked away. For the first time since the wedding, I smiled. A real smile. Margaret looked confused. Why are you smiling? Because my son had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd built an entire plan around the version of me he wished existed, not the man I actually was. I walked to my workbench, picked up a block of unfinished walnut, ran my hand across the grain. then quietly said, "Tell Adrian, I'll come on Sunday." Margaret's face turned pale. "Russell, don't." I looked at her. "Oh, I'll sign something." She frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "He's expecting a carpenter. What he's about to meet is the man who spent 40 years negotiating contracts with people who thought they were smarter than him." Margaret stood frozen, because for the first time in decades, she realized something Adrian never had. I wasn't preparing to defend myself. I was preparing to dismantle everything he'd spent months building. Sunday arrived exactly on time. So did I. Not in my work boots, not in flannel, not looking like the carpenter Adrian expected. I wore a charcoal suit Margaret had convinced me to buy 15 years earlier. I'd only worn it twice, once at Evelyn's funeral, and once when Adrian graduated from law school. He opened the front door. The smile on his face wasn't warm, it was victorious. "Dad," I nodded. "Adrian," he stepped aside. "Come in." His new house looked exactly like every expensive home in those glossy magazines. White marble, glass walls, furniture that looked beautiful but uncomfortable. Nothing about it felt lived in. At the dining table sat 3 people: Vanessa, a man in an expensive navy suit, and another woman arranging documents into neat stacks. Adrian noticed me looking.
"Oh, you haven't met everyone."
He pointed toward the man. "This is Trevor Hale, my attorney." Then the woman. "And this is Lydia Cross, independent notary." I smiled politely. "Quite an audience." Adrian laughed. "We like doing things properly." "Of course you do." I thought everything with Adrian had to look official, respectable, legal, even betrayal. Trevor slid a thick folder across the table. "Mr. Whitmore, I've highlighted everywhere we need your signature." I didn't touch it. Instead, I adjusted my glasses. "I'm old-fashioned. I read before I sign." Trevor smiled confidently. "Of course, you'll find everything straightforward." I opened the first page, exactly as Margaret had warned: power of attorney, operational control, authority over the workshop, authority over the land, authority over every active contract. Buried on page 17, the real purpose: if I became unable to efficiently manage business affairs, Adrian would immediately assume complete control. Unable, not dead, not retired. Unable, one word, dangerously vague. I slowly closed the folder. Adrian leaned forward. "So?" I looked directly at him. "You've been planning this for a while." He didn't even deny it. "I'm thinking ahead." "No, you're thinking about ownership." Vanessa crossed her arms. "Oh, don't be dramatic. It's just paperwork." I smiled. "I agree, it is just paperwork." Then I reached inside my briefcase. Trevor watched curiously. "So, you brought questions?" "No, I brought paperwork too." I placed a thick leather folder on the table. Nobody recognized it. Trevor opened it first. His confident expression disappeared almost immediately. He turned another page, then another. Finally, he looked at Adrian. "Where did you get this?" I answered. "My lawyer." Adrian frowned. "What is it?" Trevor didn't answer. He kept reading. After nearly a full minute, he slowly removed his glasses. "Adrian, you never told me about this." "Told you about what?" Trevor looked up. "The workshop." "What about it?" "It isn't owned by your father." Silence. Adrian laughed. "What?" Trevor slid one page across the table. "Legally, your father hasn't owned that property for almost 12 years. Adrian stared at the document. His smile vanished. "That's impossible." "It isn't." He looked at me. "What did you do?" I folded my hands calmly. 12 years ago, I stopped treating my workshop as a business. I converted it. Converted it into what? A protected family craft trust. Nobody spoke. Trevor continued reading. "The land, the building, the equipment, the intellectual property, the historical designs, they all belong to the trust." Vanessa frowned. "So?" Trevor looked at her. "So your husband has spent 6 months trying to take control of something his father legally cannot transfer." Adrian looked completely stunned. "No, there has to be another way." Trevor slowly shook his head. "There isn't. The trustees would have to approve." Adrian looked at me. "Fine, then approve it." I smiled. "I'm only one trustee." He blinked. "What? There are 3. His face tightened. "Who?" I answered calmly. "The first is me. The second is the Master Carpenters Guild." Trevor nodded while reading. "Correct." Adrian swallowed. "And the third?" I looked him straight in the eye. "The apprentices." He frowned. What apprentices? The 26 young men and women who've trained in my workshop over the last 20 years. He stared. They all hold voting rights. Vanessa laughed in disbelief. You're kidding. I'm not. Trevor closed the folder. It's actually brilliant. The trust exists specifically to prevent one person from selling or exploiting the workshop. Adrian's voice became louder. So all those years, you planned this? I looked at him quietly. No, I protected what generations built. You just never noticed. He slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. It's my family. I tilted my head slightly. Interesting. The workshop only became family when you thought you could own it. His face turned bright red. For the first time, I let a little steel into my voice. No, Adrian. You spent months trying to manipulate me. The difference is that I finished building this protection 12 years before you even imagined your scheme. Trevor slowly gathered his papers. I can't represent this transaction. There is no transaction. He stood. Lydia, we're done. The notary quietly packed her seal. Within seconds, the two professionals were walking toward the front door. Adrian called after them. Wait. Trevor stopped only long enough to say one sentence. You should have told me your father understood contracts better than you. The door closed. For the first time in his career, my son found himself sitting at a negotiation table, completely alone. Adrian sat there without moving. The front door had barely clicked shut behind Trevor and Lydia. The silence felt heavier than any argument. Then he laughed, not because anything was funny, because he still believed he could win. You think you've beaten me? I looked at him. I think you've beaten yourself. He stood abruptly. So what? I can't buy the workshop. I'll wait. You won't live forever. Margaret inhaled sharply. Even Vanessa looked uncomfortable. But Adrian kept talking. When you're gone, I'll get everything eventually. That was the moment, the exact moment I stopped seeing my son. I saw a man waiting for another man to die. I slowly stood. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. His confidence returned. Why? Because now I don't have to protect you anymore. He frowned. What does that mean? I picked up my briefcase. There are 2 meetings tomorrow morning. He smirked. So the first one is with the trustees. His smile faded slightly. The second is with every client whose projects are scheduled over the next 4 years. Now he looked confused. What are you talking about? I walked toward the door. You'll find out. Monday morning, 8 o'clock. The workshop had never been so full. 26 former apprentices. Architects, builders, church representatives, historic preservation directors, private clients, everyone who had trusted my hands for decades. Many had traveled across the state after receiving my call. Adrian arrived 20 minutes late. He hadn't been invited, but somehow he knew. He burst through the workshop doors. What is this? Nobody answered. He looked around. Then he noticed the cameras, not television cameras, professional recording equipment. Every meeting was being documented. One of the trustees stood. Mr. Whitmore, we're ready. I nodded. The chairman addressed the room. Russell has informed us that repeated attempts have been made to obtain control of the Whitmore Craft Trust through deception. Several people exchanged uneasy looks. The chairman continued. According to Article 9, any direct family member found attempting to exploit the trust for personal financial gain may be permanently excluded from all future participation. Adrian interrupted. This is ridiculous. I'm his son, the chairman calmly replied. Today, you're simply a guest. He looked at me. Dad, tell them. I said nothing. Instead, I pressed a button on the projector remote. The wall behind me lit up a video wedding footage. Crystal clear. Adrian's voice echoed through the workshop. You're not my father anymore. Then the slap. No edits, no commentary. Only silence afterward. Some of the apprentices looked away. Others stared directly at Adrian. Then another recording began. High audio. His own voice. My old man still thinks this is about family. It stopped being about family months ago. The room became absolutely still. Adrian turned pale. Where did you get that? I didn't answer, because I didn't have to. Someone else did. Julian Rhodes stepped forward from the back of the room. The same man who had called me weeks earlier. Adrian stared. You... Julian nodded. Yes, I'm the commercial attorney you hired to secretly approach your father's property. Adrian's mouth opened, no words came out. Julian continued. When I refused, your business partner hired another firm. I decided Mr. Whitmore deserved to know why strangers kept circling his workshop. Vanessa slowly backed away from Adrian. She had never known. Neither had Margaret. The chairman closed the folder. The trustees have reached a unanimous decision. Every eye in the room turned toward him. Effective immediately, Adrian Whitmore is permanently barred from holding any position, voting rights, advisory role, or financial interest connected to the Whitmore Craft Trust. One sentence, permanent, irrevocable. His last name no longer gave him access to the legacy he wanted to sell. But I wasn't finished. I looked toward the clients gathered in the workshop. For 40 years, you trusted me because my word meant something. I've decided it's time to retire. A murmur spread through the room. Adrian smiled. Finally. He thought this helped him. Then I continued. The trust will continue, but not under one owner. I pointed toward my apprentices. Every future commission, every design, every contract will be managed collectively by the people who actually built this place beside me. Applause erupted, not polite applause. Real applause, the kind earned over decades. Adrian looked around desperately. Nobody was looking at him anymore. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the center of the room. He was invisible. 3 months later, the wedding photographs had disappeared from social media. People kept asking why. The answer was simple. Every image from that day contained the moment a groom struck his own father. No amount of editing could erase it. Several of Adrian's corporate clients quietly ended their relationships. Not because I contacted them. I never did. People in business value one thing above almost everything else: character, and eventually, character introduces itself. Vanessa filed for divorce less than a year after the wedding. Not because of the trust, because she finally admitted something during mediation. I married the image. I never noticed there wasn't much underneath. As for me, I never spoke to Adrian again, not out of anger, out of completion. Some stories deserve another chapter. This one didn't. The last time I saw him, he stood across the street from my workshop, exactly where that black SUV had once been parked. He looked at the building for several minutes. Then he got back into his car and drove away. He finally understood what I had known from the beginning. He had never lost a building. He had lost the right to belong inside it. And unlike money, some doors, once closed, are never opened again.